Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, business continuity, emergency management, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Longtime listeners and viewers, you will know that I attended the Disaster Recovery Journal Fall 2023 conference with my co-host, James Green. We did a live broadcast from there, and we got to talk to a lot of great speakers and guests that stopped by. And if I was lucky enough, I wanted to be able to get some of those guests and speakers to come on to the show and do an actual episode of their own. And today, I am lucky enough to do that. We're going to be talking on the topic of, are you focusing on the proper areas of resiliency for your organization? And I'd like to welcome to the show the presenter of that topic, Cary Jasgur. Cary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you joined us on the live broadcast. You and I
did.
worked on something else, I think, about 2 years ago as well. So this is kind of like your third appearance with me on the show in one form or another. So I know a little bit about you, but we may have some global listeners that aren't familiar with Cary, and shame on them. But could you take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this crazy industry of ours?
Sure. I'll start with the latter part of that, is how I got into this. I like to have I have a little saying that nobody wakes up and says, I want to do resiliency. It just does not happen. There's not really a formal education program to get you here outside of risk management, really. So there's usually three paths. You fell into it and have been spending your entire career trying to get back out. You were you were voluntold because someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we need someone to do this. Why don't you try and figure it out?" Or you had the foresight to suggest to your organization that this might be an area we might want to focus on as the world is changing to ensure that we can continue to deliver to our customers. Whatever the reason you got here, it's a great place to be. It's one of the few environments that really does evolve continuously. So not like, accounting that is pretty much the same as it was 30 years ago. You just use technology now instead of a pencil and a green bar sheet. So it's an ever-changing, emerging world. Very, very fascinating. I've been lucky enough to be in the industry for just over 30 years in various iterations. I started my career back when disaster recovery was the backup server right next to the production one, and you just move the cable in the back.
I remember those too.
And that was your DR plan, all the way through working as a global consultant for 15 years, helping organizations around the world either start, develop, maintain, advance their programs to the next level to meet whatever needs they had. As a consultant, I was often brought in for one of three reasons again. A, you failed an audit. B, something happened and you were woefully unprepared. Or C, you just thought it was a really good idea. I'm happy to say most of them were the C ones, which is great.
Good.
But I've enjoyed my journey and have really liked evolving and working across multiple industries.
And I guess that brought you to your topic at DRJ.
Yes. So what brought that up was the culmination of years of experience of where were organizations failing. So as a consultant, why was I being brought in? What was I supposed to fix? And that kind of led to the creation of this topic to kind of help organizations and the continuity professionals identify, are they putting their efforts in the right place? Is it more than just doing BIA after BIA? Is there something else that they can be doing to catapult their program to the next level?
Well, let's jump into your presentation and talk about some of the key pieces of it. One of the first things you identified is you talk about the new normal. Can you explain what you meant by the new normal?
So everyone has heard in one iteration or another the new normal as reference to a post COVID-19 world. Um, I use the phrase because it does resonate with individuals. However, there is no such thing really as a new normal. It's just a different normal. So how we do business dramatically changed over the course of 2 years. Regardless of the industry you're in, things changed. And organizations that were more in the forefront of their resilience landscape were able to pivot sooner. Others were scrambling 18 months after, trying to figure out how to get remote work to operate properly, how to get it to everyone at home, how to continue everything. So I really took the approach of it's, well, I'm old enough to remember the whole Y2K scare. So think of it about that is one day you did things a certain way, and the next day it's like, oh boy, what happened? How do we pivot for this? So it's not so much a new normal as it is a different perspective on business.
Yeah, I like that because just using the term, what's normal for you may not be normal for me or another organization, and we can be in the same industry and
Exactly.
still do something different. So the new normal, well, if we've all got a different definition of normal, what does new normal mean then? So so that makes more
Yep.
sense, a different normal.
Yeah. So it's a different normal. It's a different perspective. It's looking at business through a different lens. And as you mentioned, you could be in the same industry, you could be competitors, and still, depending on your resilience landscape, one of you may be more prepared than the other.
Yes, and we really found that out as a result of COVID. Who was and who wasn't.
It was, I don't want to really link it to, but it was the second wake up call that organizations got in relation to their resiliency aspect. So the second big one, there was a little one in between. So Hurricane Sandy being one of those, at least for the eastern seaboard of the U.S. and up into east part of Canada, that was a second kind of aha moment of we need to figure out and move a little bit more. The first one, of course, being the surge in our industry of 9/11,
Yeah,
and that's when resilience was always there, but that's where it really got its foothold.
yeah. And I do remember the Y2K stuff too. So you're making me feel old today, Cary. So let's move on to some of the key areas you talked about in your resilience program that organizational leaders should be focusing on. So let's go through some of the ones that you identified. And the first one you talked about was risk assessments.
So we've all done risk assessments in our career at some point, but what I was mentioning during the session was, are you doing the appropriate type of assessment? Are you assessing your program against where you are today and where you want to be as a general whole, looking at, some holistic areas, saying, we're at a 2 here, we can do this. We could probably improve it by documenting it, automating it, modernizing it, and that takes us to a 3 or a 4. But it's more than just your basic risk assessment. It's a holistic assessment of, even if you wanted to consider as we talk about the same industry, what are your competitors doing that's publicly available that you can compare yours against?
Mhm.
How are they prepared? Uh, I've done as a consultant, I've actually done assessments in job description to see if similar positions are being offered, remote or hybrid or all on site. That lends to the resilient landscape of an overall organization. So it's are you assessing the right thing to get the desired outcome rather than just, oh yes, we know this is a risk. We can all do that.
Well, how do you go about changing that whole perspective then? Because let's face it, when even you can do a search online and you'll get risk assessments, what's your impact to a fire, a flood, or a financial impact as a result of this, or those kind of very basic questions. How do you change that perspective? Because that's what everyone's familiar with, including leadership.
And as politely as possible, the best way to actually do that is, well, we're all aware of what our risk factors might be, what our mitigation steps are. It's, I have found it's beneficial to actually share with leadership what happens if we do not mitigate that risk. So again, depending on your organizational culture, if you've got that, strong buy-in from leadership and you can speak candidly, this is what happens if we do not put this in place that mitigates their risk. Anytime you talk about money, that's a really easy way to get someone's attention. Or if you talk about reputation, that's another way to get people's attention. No, but no organization wants to be on the front page unless it's a good thing.
Yeah. I find it really hard sometimes to change that though, because the leadership is so focused on just a couple of key areas, like you just mentioned too. Our brand, our financial standing. So how do you get them to see through a different light, even if I can sit in front of them? We still, us business continuity people or disaster recovery people or crisis management, whatever you want to call us, we're still often seen as, oh, here comes those disaster guys again. What are they going to complain about now? You know, so how do you get that whole mindset to change to say, hey, this guy, this girl, whoever it is bringing up some really interesting things we need to consider.
So a little step back. Once upon a time, I worked for a university in Washington, D.C., and that's when I went on site every day. Outside my door was, of course, my name and my title, and underneath it, someone had another sign made that said the doom and gloom guy. Um, because that's essentially what we are. You know, we're not revenue generating, so we're the ones that only point out problems. We do our very best to point out viable solutions for those problems, but the leadership stance is I do not want to talk to that person because they're just going to tell me something else is broken and we need to spend money to fix it, which is kind of true. That's essentially what we do, not so barbaric, but essentially what we do. And changing that mindset of how do I get you engaged that you want to talk to me? And that's, as I
Mm,
mentioned, is start showing what happens if we do not. So do nothing is always an option. It may not be the most effective option, but it is always an option. So if we do nothing, this is what happens. If we do not properly have our third-party vendors vetted, that we understand what their resiliency programs are in place so that they can, if something happens to them, there's protections in place so we can still continue. We ran into, for a lot of organizations during COVID, supply chain being a
mm,
massive problem. It's showing leadership and not just leadership, but showing the business owners, the ones that actually do the work. Okay, you do this, important service. If you do not do that, tell me what happened so I can tell leadership where it's going to hit us. And so getting that engagement with the business owner truly in an ownership role of owning what it is that they do and owning their plans, not just me writing it and saying, here's your plan, but hopefully you do not have to use it, but getting it written in such a way that we've done the very best mitigation possible, but more important, we've actually identified what happens if we do nothing or what happens if we do something wrong.
mhm.
And if you can present that to leadership, it allows them to look at, you know, that technology or that process differently. So, if you say to someone in senior leadership, what happens if Office 365 goes down? Okay, first thing is, well, it can never go down. I need my email. I'm like, oh, okay. No offense to senior leadership, but they're the last person to read their email. So you
Yeah.
probably do not need it. But what I point out is, do we have other means of communication outside of email? Do you have another structure that's outside the office umbrella that you can use? Mobile phones, texting, stuff like this, like Zoom. And remind them also, in a case of Office 365, if Office 365 goes down, there's more people involved than just us.
Right. Yeah,
You
that's
could
true.
have entire geographic regions offline. Most organizations have moved away from you have your exchange server in a data center somewhere. It's all that cloud world to make it seamless and easy, and we can carry it in our pocket. Um, but it's getting leadership to look at things differently. So more than just the traditional here's our plan. Here's what happens if we lose technology. This is what we do. Okay, great. Well, what if that does not work? Do
Yeah,
we have a backup for our backup? And getting them to think holistically. And again, as I mentioned, when you point out if you can directly connect something to reputation or financial loss, suddenly you have everyone's attention.
that's true. Yes. On that note, believe it or not, we've already come to the end of our first segment. Today, we are talking with Cary Jasgur, and we're talking about focusing on the proper areas of resilience within your organization. And we will be right back. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.